Now let's look at a really simple example of Ajax and how it works. So I'm going to go ahead and close the jQuery UI folder and right-click on Share, create a new PHP file called testajax.php. And I'll close out the PHP island, create some HTML5, and change the title to Ajax. And let's just go ahead and put some HTML in here. So here's a paragraph. Here is some fetched content, and then I'll have a span with nothing in it. And let me go ahead and put an ID on here so I can refer to that span. So if I go ahead and load this page, I get, here is some fetched content. Now, what Ajax does is it lets JavaScript running on this page pretend to be a browser and contact a web server the way a browser would contact it, fetches the results, whatever the content of the page that's being fetched is, and then JavaScript can take that result and do something with it. And in jQuery, there's a really convenient wrapper on top of the Ajax functionality. So if you're working in straight JavaScript with no helper libraries, the code is pretty hairy. But in jQuery, it's pretty straightforward. So let's take a look at that. So I'm going to go ahead and write a script. And I'm going to write a function that gets executed when the page is ready. So function like so. And this is using jQuery. So I'm going to go ahead and include jQuery here. And I have that in assets, jQuery UI, external, jQuery.js. And what this function is going to do, let's start with a really simple example. All this function is going to do is get that content span and set the contents to content. So this is not using Ajax because it's not fetching anything from the server. Go ahead and reload. And I have a little problem, so let's take a look at the debugger. Console. So I have the wrong path for jQuery. So let's take a look. Oh, it's assets. Yeah, assets, jQuery-UI, external, jQuery/jQuery.js. Okay, there we go. So now if I reload, it fills in that span with the word content. But what if we want to fill it in with the contents of a PHP script? Well, under Assets, I'm going to create another folder called Actions. And that's going to be where I'm going to put all of my Ajax scripts. So at top level in the share folder are pages that the user loads directly. Inside of this Actions folder is going to be pages, scripts, that JavaScript uses for Ajax. And I'm going to create a new PHP file, and we'll call this getContent.php. And all this is going to do is it's going to echo the word content from Ajax, like so. And now if I load this in a browser, localhost assets, actions, get content.php, oh, it's CIS 295, /share/assets actions. There. So there's the content from Ajax that I see in the browser if I load that directly. But now jQuery is going to do the same thing. So test Ajax. Here's what the Ajax looks like. $.get, and then I put the URL I want to fetch. So that's going to be the same as the URL I just loaded in the browser. Which relative, so I'm in this folder right now, and share. So I just need to go assets, actions, get content. So that is going to fetch the contents of this page right here. And then I'm going to give it a function to call when it's got the contents. And it's going to pass the contents into this function. So function data. And then this data is going to be the contents of this page here. So what I'm going to do is this, except I'm going to set the text to be whatever data is, like so. So now let's reload the page. Content from Ajax. And if we look at what the network is doing, I'm going to hit reload. So first it loads test Ajax. And then when test Ajax is loaded, it loads jQuery.js, which is all this stuff here. And then when the document is ready, this function gets executed. So it fetches the contents of this page, which is right here. Looks just like a browser is fetching the content, except it's actually the JavaScript that's fetching it. And then the response is just this text. So the text comes back as data. I set the contents of the content span with that data, and it shows up on the page. Now, obviously, this could be returning HTML. So for example, span style equals color : red /span. So now I have HTML coming back instead of just a piece of text. So to make this actually look like HTML instead of text, I just set HTML of the content tab instead of text of the content tab. There you go. So this works fine if you want to fetch HTML or straight text, but what if you want something that's a little more structured? So for example, you want to fetch some complex data, like an array or an object or something like that from the back end. Well, the way that's usually handled is to encode the data into something called JavaScript Object Notation, JSON, and then PHP sends JSON back, which is just a text format, text encoding of the object or data, and then JavaScript can decode that on the other side. And if you specify the right content type and the result, jQuery will automatically decode your JSON object. So let's go ahead and see what that looks like. So at the top, first thing I'm going to do is in the response that this page is sending, I want to tell whoever's fetching it that I'm not sending back HTML or text, I'm sending back JSON data. And I do that by changing the content type header to application/JSON. And that tells whoever is fetching this data that it's actually going to be a JSON object. And then instead of just echoing a piece of text, I need to echo a JSON string. So here's an example of a JSON string. HTML colon span style equal color colon red semicolon content span, and then close that string off, and then close my JSON object off. So this is an object with an HTML property, and the HTML has a string in it. I hope, anyway. Let's go ahead and find out. So I'm going to go ahead and go back to here, and I'm going to put a breakpoint right there. I can't because this is JavaScript, but what I can do is reload, and then go to sources, and test Ajax. I'm going to put a breakpoint right on this line. Reload. So now I'm stopped and I can look at data. So data is an object. It's an object with an HTML property, and the value of that property is this piece of text. So if I want this to show up in the browser, instead of setting HTML to a JavaScript object, I want to set it to the value of the HTML property of that object. So this is going to be this piece of text right here is going to be set as the HTML of this content span. And there you go. So the advantage of sending JSON back is that I can send more than just one property. I can send a status and a message, or username, password, email address, and all that stuff, structured format in a way that's really easy to work with on the JavaScript side. And then you'll notice that actually writing this is pretty awkward, but it's pretty easy to let PHP do the hard work for you. So object is equal to new standard class. So this is the type of a generic object in PHP, and I can just make a new one of those, and then I can set a property pointer HTML is equal to this piece of text. So now I have an object with an HTML property, and the value of that HTML property is this piece of text. If I want to send that back to JavaScript, all I can do is say JSON encode object. So let's go ahead and reload, and it works the same. Now the advantage is I can send multiple properties pretty easily, so count is equal to 3, and then here span ID is count, times. Here I'm going to set content to be this, the data.html, and I'm going to set count to be data.count. So content 3 times.